hiccups for my first time in a long time
hiccup
this
and
weekend.
jerky.
I normally get one hiccup. I have like one hiccup very easily.
Not really.
Yeah.
You don't get continued hiccups. I mean, I guess I don't either now at this point in my life, generally speaking. But
I mean, but you can get hiccups from not drinking too. You don't get regular hiccups. I don't get regular hiccups because I'm strong.
yeah, yeah, that's what I was just saying. I'm not.
But you're weak.
I'm not. Well, yeah, yeah. I'm not. I wasn't saying that like. Well, you know, I always get them from drinking, but not from anywhere else or something like that. No, I'm saying generally.
I think hiccups are one of the worst things that could that like you could wish upon someone. Like as a mundane thing, obviously I would wish death. But like
Yeah. Okay. Give
but
your.
like a subtle
Mhm.
like you have to deal with this now for the rest of your life.
Mm.
Imagine hiccuping while you sleep.
Yeah, that wouldn't be.
You can't. You don't even sleep that well anyway, Andy. What are you gonna now? What hiccups for you?
This is Little the podcast where Dani wishes terrible things on other people because she lives a very sheltered life and doesn't know anything besides hiccups but being bad. My name is Andrew
That
Cleveland.
sounds great. I do live a sheltered life. My name is Dani Winter, obviously.
I mean, to be perfectly honest, like I think it's not. I think it's a good thing if the worst thing that you can think of inflicting upon someone is.
Imagine
hiccups.
that was. My therapist would be like, I don't think so. Actually, Dani,
Well,
that's not what you said last week.
yes. Well, hold on a second. This is the Little Lits, our podcast where we kind of talk about things that are either tangentially related to what we've been reading or just whatever we want to talk about, which such as last week's episode or the last Little Lit episode, where we just asked each other questions about our friendship. But
And about me.
this one in particular is going to be more, at least, along the lines of what we just read because we in our last our last episode that was out, we read The Black Tongue Thief by Christopher Buehlman, and we had previously read Christopher Buehlman for this podcast when we read his book Between Two Fires. And we want to talk a little bit about both, I guess, our process for why we would, when we think it's appropriate to reread for this podcast, because we don't do that often. But also, like, what...
As long as they're white male authors.
It's
That's
the only,
pretty much
it's the only time we do
our
it.
criteria.
But I guess, like, then it's, like, also just, like, what do we think is... Like, when do we go back to reread authors? Like, like, even if we read something good, do we immediately go back and read other
Yeah,
things
when do
by
you take
them?
an author back? You know? You have to wait a couple months. You have to tell your mom.
Mm-hmm.
You have to tell your friends. You have to be like, we're going to welcome them back. We're taking it slow.
After
We're
all,
not diving
after
into
all your
things.
friends were like, that shithead, really? And then they have to be
Yeah.
like, oh my god, I always loved you guys together.
Yeah. That's always the worst. I've never done that.
And no one is thinking about
Don't
any
look at my
names in
college track
particular.
record.
So I guess like that's the first question. Like if you read something that you're like, wow, like I really enjoy this author, do you immediately think like I'm gonna read everything else by them, or do you kind of like, or you're just like, oh, good to know, and then just meh.
I go into like spirals of authors, but I also think that when that happens, I'm reading books that, like Funny Story. Like I then read a fuck ton of her stuff.
Was that Emily Henry or was that?
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
And then, I mean, obviously, I don't want to say obviously. I am currently in a Sarah J. Maas.
Yep.
You could call deep dive. I
wouldn't, because otherwise that it's probably a sexual position in one of her stories.
Yeah. Actually, Throne of Glass is not sexual.
Okay.
There's like some sexual things, but it's not like A Quarter of Silver Flames, which is her last one, which you're like, oh my god, these people need to stop. How are they having so much sex?
Can't read this in public.
And you can't. But I typically will go back if I'm really liking an author. I will go back and read other stuff by them. But I think that the story, like the authors that I do that with, are pretty low stakes in the sense that I it's not taking up too much brain space for me.
Okay, so you're not like going through the collected works of Shakespeare or one after another.
No,
You're more just
but
like I'm gonna burn through.
But I
anything.
will say I mean reading Throne of Glass which I think is like 7 books.
Damn, yeah.
And I listened to them. Nope, I listened to and read like, so I would basically listen when I was out for walks, and then I would read them like when I was going to bed.
Interesting. Mixed media. All right.
Mixed media. I'm a mixed media girl. Switching it up.
Yep, sure. Yep, all those things track. Yep.
Yeah, so that definitely took some brain power because I was in that world for a long time.
A minute.
Yeah, like
Well,
6 months.
I guess. Do you do that with authors that don't write series? Like, because obviously we just mentioned, you mentioned Sarah J. Maas, and I'm definitely going to bring up some fantasy authors and stuff because, you read a trilogy, you're like, well, damn, this person really knows what they're doing, so I'll read some other ones by them, and then that's an easy way to do it. I feel because you know that your investment is probably going to pay off over the course of multiple books, so you're like you feel pretty comfortable doing it. But I don't know.
Yeah,
Like
I've done it
individual
with
stories.
Sanderson.
I was gonna say. I mean, I read Mistborn, and then I read the other Mistborn series, Wax and Wane. Did you? What,
Yeah,
you read?
I did. Trust in the Emerald Sea.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Which was so fucking good.
Oh, yeah, I remember you mentioning that.
Ken Liu.
Yeah, I mean that's a good point because I read Dandelion
Body
Dynasty on
Dandelion Dynasty.
but I read that on strength of the Paper Menagerie. I'm not saying I wouldn't have read it at any point, but I made a point of prioritizing it because we did read the short story collection first.
Did you read Three Body Problem?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
That's how I knew the name. That's why because he was the translator on the first book,
Yes.
maybe the third book as well. I forget. And so when we did Paper Menagerie, I was like, oh yeah, if this is well recommended, then I thought this guy did a great job with Three Body Problem, but it's not his original work, so who knows for sure. And then we did Paper Menagerie, and it's like, oh yeah, this is fucking amazing.
Fucking everything. Yeah, so good.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like for me, it's very easy to go to fantasy stories. I've been reading fucking a lot of Joe Abercrombie this year.
Abercrombie and Fitch is my favorite place to get jeans.
Still.
Okay, that was really fucking harsh. They had a whole rebrand, dude. Just because you haven't bought any new clothes besides graphic t-shirts in years.
Year, singular, but yes.
What did you buy?
Pants and some sweaters and some like quasi like middle scale type dress.
Nice. Okay, take it back.
Well, but you're not wrong. Let's be very clear. I don't think about buying clothes a whole lot. So
but Abercrombie did do a rebrand, so I don't feel bad about. Shopping.
Well, yeah, there was when I was growing up, they were you must be an anorexic model to fit the standards of.
Yeah. That's not the case anymore.
Do you have?
Sometimes.
Do you have above a size 34 waist? Get the fuck out of my store!
Yeah, and I will say for some reason Abercrombie now is pretty size inclusive.
Okay.
And I know I'm going to be the same size in all of their styles of jeans.
Oh, they're actually consistent.
Fucking rare.
Yeah, I was gonna say
which
that's
is so rare.
Yeah, and I know that's very different, like men's and women's shopping too. So which
is so stupid.
Yeah, I agree. I mean,
I love men's pants are awesome. If I'm going for no, seriously, I have like a couple of pairs of men's jeans because of the way that they're measured is an actual measurement.
And not just like a size that doesn't mean anything.
Not just like
basically.
a size that means nothing.
Yeah. To be fair, Old Navy sizes don't mean anything.
No, that's true. You can get two of the exact same size at Old Navy, and they'll be like 2 inches different.
And they're also like, an Old Navy 38 is like is going to be an old Abercrombie 52 or something like that. Like it's
that's
very
the same
forgiving.
Thing with Target.
Yeah,
like a Target, they have like the like junior section, not even just like fucking younger section,
Young
and
adults.
then they have the you have to be a lawyer section is basically the only two sections that they have. But the sizing there, I'm a size like, which is a totally fine. I don't really give a fuck about numbers.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people do, but I'm like in the junior section, I'm like a size 16, and then in the adult section, I'm a size 4, and like one of these numbers, it like I just average it out. Is
like,
basically what I do.
Yeah. It means pretty much nothing at that point.
It means nothing. Anyway, what does mean something is having an author that you like and going back to, similar to Abercrombie, that I always go back to for pants, and similar to Joe Abercrombie that you go back to for
for
books.
books. Yes,
Was it Joe Abercrombie? Did I get
yeah,
that
you
first
got
name
it.
right?
Nailed it.
God,
Got it in
she's
one.
good.
Because like also and that's an author that like I actually did not really like when I first started reading, and had but like people kept saying how good he is, I care about like trying to be complete about the fantasy genre in general because
Just like Abercrombie and Fitch.
and he rebranded, and now he's actually he's like his
It's
book.
actually kind of cool.
His book, The Heroes, is like arguably one of the better fantasy like standalone like single fantasy stories I've read. It takes place in a book in a world that is that he's been writing in for a while. So, is it really a standalone? Like, yes, by the plot, but no, because like it fits into a larger story still.
Well, then,
But
like,
yeah.
how would you argue then Guy Gavriel Kay has like I feel like if you're gonna use that logic for this type of book, I feel like Guy Gavriel Kay, we talk about him having a lot of standalone fantasies, and a lot of his fantasies live in the same world.
Yeah, but they don't overlap characters, and they don't. And
Some of them do.
uh,
Lions of Alverson, I thought had had some overlap characters with with a couple of his books.
I mean, maybe some of the later ones, but they don't come up. But, like it's very. I'll say this like when the Sarantine Mosaic, for example, is a two-parter I mentioned on our last episode that takes place in the same world as Lions of Alverson, but the only thing that actually like connects them is the gods that are used. Like there's there's no character overlap, there's no location overlap, there's no plot line overlap.
Maybe that's what I was thinking.
So like
maybe I was just trying to get you.
whereas like the Abercrombie stuff, it's all written in the same world, but like the Heroes, which is the standalone book, features characters that are in like his main series, you know, and references events that happened in his books previously, as well as referencing other characters that existed in that are like tangential to this particular story, but they still come up in the story as well. Like you know who the king is because you met him in the last series. So when a character is referencing his relationship with the king, like you understand who he is and what the king is like because of that.
So you wouldn't necessarily count that as or you don't know if you would count that as like a standalone.
Yeah, I think
maybe it's a side quest.
I mean, kind of. I think it's like I don't think it necessarily matters, and it's kind of splitting hairs. I think you could read the book even if you didn't know the rest of the overall story, and you'd be doing okay. But my point is that like this is a guy I go back to because he was supposed to be very good in the genre, and I have not made myself, but like made a point of going back and reading some of the stuff that I wasn't as sure about the first time, and like it's paid off, which is nice. But like I guess that's what I'm saying. Like it's like it series for me, especially fantasy series or detective series. Like those are really easy. Just read the same thing by another author again. You know how I love the Cadfael books, right?
Yeah.
I've read 9 of those things. Like they are fantastic, and I will never get tired of them. But I think that's very different from reading like a literary fiction novel and then like waiting 5 years for their next big magnus opus or whatever to come out.
Yeah. Wasn't I don't know if I'm correct about this. Couldn't you read all the Wolf Halls separately? Like you didn't necessarily have to read them in a specific. Like you didn't have to read them all together.
I think they stand alone enough that you could read one and not read
Was that
the
just something
others.
that we decided though, and not that like how it was necessarily positioned?
Oh yeah, I don't think it was intentionally put together like that. You definitely can't read
Okay.
them out of order, otherwise you're reading his life out of order. I think
That's true.
I think that you could. I think you'd only be able to do like maybe you could just read the first book, like Wolf Hall, and then not read the follow-ups or something like that, and still get and still be like, oh, that was a cool story.
I think we had talked about that specifically with the second one, that you could read the second one without necessarily needing to read all of them, but I'm probably just fucking that up. So moving on.
Well,
I don't know. I'm trying, besides like Sanderson.
I guess I feel like genre authors in general are easier to do this with than like literary fiction authors. And like if anyone knows from past episodes, like I do not. That's not a value judgment or anything like that. I do not partake in that bullshit. But I think that the nature of writing genre is that you do deal with like either similar characters or the same character as a main character over and over again, and so it's a lot easier to like for continuity to read just another book as opposed to Like I read Bel Canto by Anne Patchett. It was delight.
Mm.
It was. I'm not going to spoil it too much, so I'm not going to go into too much detail. But like, it was a very, very, very good book. I will probably read Anne Patchett again at some point, and maybe my solution for this will be like doing it for this podcast. But like otherwise, I don't know when I'd get back to her next. Like I think I'd be more likely to just like try new authors and try new stuff out for a while, and then like maybe something would have to hit me where I wanted to go back to read that author again in particular.
I still want to read, what is it called, The Ninth House by
Lee
Leah.
Bardugo.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
am
that's
I am interested in that. I have read, and we've talked about this, the Mortal Instruments series
mm.
by something Clara.
I know who you mean. Yes,
Yeah,
not
the
Cassandra
Mortal.
Cain, right?
No, Cassandra Clare.
Oh, is it?
I think it's Cassandra Clara.
Okay.
I'm gonna look it up. But she did a prequel series called Clockwork, the Clockwork Prince, Clockwork Princess, and Clockwork Angels, or maybe it's Clockwork Angels is the entire
Sure.
series name, and it happens before the Mortal Instruments, and there is like no, it's in the same world, but it's not cross contaminating. That's not the right word. That's what happens when I have an allergic reaction. Um, it's not like
That's when you go to a dim sum place that maybe isn't up to code. Yeah,
I've never been to a dim sum
I know.
place. Okay, I did. I was surrounded by so much fucking seafood this weekend though.
Mm-mm.
Survived.
Trying to, not for lack of
Look
them
at me.
trying.
Look at me now. But I did go back to that. I would be super interested to go back and reread those because that was a high school read for me,
Yeah.
or maybe even a college read for me. Um, I've been told they still hold up. I know we've talked about visiting them for this for the pod. But it would be a reread for me, and we typically don't do it a lot of. We try not to do any rereads. I know that we've done a couple of
We
rereads
have,
for you,
yeah.
but in the sense that you read them like what 500 years ago or something. So
In the sense that I'm much older than you and therefore have more time to fill with books. Yes.
well,
Fuck
also
you.
you just like typically were reading more than me. I feel like I've been catching up this past year,
You
and
said,
I know it's not a competition, but I love
but how many books
competing
do you?
with you. No, you don't count listening. How many books have you ingested this year is how I'm gonna put that.
How many books have you consumed this year?
Consumed, ingested. What do you like better?
I don't know. Take your pick. I think I default to consume, but I don't think that's right exactly. I don't think it's like the best way to say it or anything.
But I'm gonna say ingested because it's different than you,
That's fine. Just fucking do
and
it.
we're different people.
Yeah. Thank God.
Yeah, yeah.
Well,
Are there? Go on. What are you gonna say?
I guess like that kind of gets back to my point a little bit because like you want to read this author that you read like a series of before, and so even if you read a series that is not using the same characters or even if it's not feeding into the previous plot, there's still some stuff that's going to be consistent enough that you get something like you get some familiarity out of it, I guess.
Yeah.
And to be very clear, that's not a knock because I do it all the time, but like I think it's I'm trying to think of like authors that have written like one book that I've really really dug, and did I ever go back and read something else of theirs? Like Jennifer Egan wrote The Goon Squad, A Visit from the Goon Squad. Brilliant book. It's well awarded. I do not remember what if she won certain awards for it or whatever, but I really like that, but I think the only other book of hers I've read was the Keep, and the only reason I read that book was because my mom like gave it to me for a birthday or a Christmas present. I had it like on hand. It was something I eventually got to because of that. And like again, I really liked The Visit from the Goon Squad, but I haven't gone back and read. She's had 2 books that have come out since Manhattan Beach and The Candy House, and I have not read those. And there's a lot of other authors like that where I've read one of their books and I'm like, oh man, that was really fucking good.
Yeah.
Time to never read them again. Like not intentionally, I just don't like go right back into reading everything else they ever did after that.
I think traditionally for Lit, when we've gone back and redone authors, like we've done we did the sequel to Less.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, interesting. Greer. Yeah.
We did Casey McQuiston.
Yep, we did. Yep, we went back to we did Red, White, and Royal Blue, and then we did One Last
Train
Stop.
Stop? One Last Stop.
Yeah,
One Last
yeah.
Stop. Not Train Spotting. um, um, and then we just did Christopher Buehlman. Have you
Yeah.
done anyone else?
I was trying to think of that same thing. I can't recall off the top of my head, at least. No.
I don't know, but I do. At least for those three that I remember, we've been. I think disappointed is gonna be
Yeah.
a big word for that, but we haven't enjoyed the second books as much as we've enjoyed the first.
Yeah.
And I think we've typically picked, for obvious reasons, we've picked books that we fucking loved the first ones of, and I think that you and I do a good job of being like, wasn't this fucking awesome? Wasn't this awesome? It was so good, blah, 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 and like building each other up.
Yeah.
And then we'll get to the second books and we'll be like, this wasn't the same fucking book.
Yeah, which is
What?
which of course is like no shade. I mean, we were just talking about in the last episode about Buellman. Like we spent the first like 15, 20 minutes being like, man, I didn't get into this one as much. And then it's like, well, how would you rate the book? It's like, oh, it's still in your case, I think B plus. It's like, oh yeah, it's still a good book. I still really liked it. And it's just that like by comparison's sake. And I think that's part of why I shy away from books, because generally speaking, or
From books?
from rereading authors, I know.
This is actually why I'm coming out right now saying that I've never read for this podcast.
No, it's always been Cliff Notes. It's
Always.
in Wikipedia.
I actually pay for Cliff Notes. I'm the only person.
I'm gonna come out as a Chat GPT user on this podcast. Fuck and no. Good God.
We finally post a video and people just see that I'm talking to chat.
It's reflected in like the glasses. Like we think we're being really slick and it's just scrolling by
Yeah.
on the lenses. But like I guess like that's we choose books that we hear are really good for this podcast. We generally, if we are reading an author, we are probably reading what is considered to be their best book, I would think, in most cases. I mean, I'm not saying all the time, but
Yeah.
generally speaking, like otherwise, like, if someone's got like a book that everyone else says is absolutely amazing, you have to read this, that's phenomenal, blah blah blah, why would we start with book B instead? We're gonna go right to
Yeah.
the one everyone. So theoretically, if
We have fucked ourselves over a few times with that.
So-
By we, I mean me.
so I guess the point is, like, if we do get to that point where we decide we want to like reread an author, we're as if we believe what everyone else is saying, and like book A is their best book, then when we get to book B or C or D or whatever, then we're probably going to be a little bit let down, because that was supposed to be their big one.
Yeah.
And that's I think unfair, but it is often true as well.
It is unfair, Andy.
Well, I guess like because it doesn't feel shitty being like, man, I didn't really like this book as much. Like, well, yeah, dude, you comparing it to like,
You're comparing it to something that you loved.
yeah, and that's that's probably there are some authors that can just put out banger after banger after banger. Like I've read 3 Emily St. John Mandel books, and like I have my order of how I like them, but at the same time, I'm not going to say any of those books are bad by any stretch.
No.
So like,
Trying to think if I have like. I think that for me, specifically, like thinking about the Mistborn series and then reading Tress in the Emerald Sea, it was in such, because I haven't read that. I read the other Mistborn series. I read the first one.
oh, the Western one, the Wax
Yes.
and Lane books. Oh, okay,
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah.
I didn't do that.
And I don't know what happened. I started reading Throne of Glass, and
Sure.
with like other people.
Yeah, that'll do it.
So that like really took me. But I did the Sanderson book. I did the Mistborn series, and then did Trust in the Emerald Sea, and that was such a different world that it almost felt like a totally different. Not a different, almost honestly, kind of like a different author almost. Like you could see the connections and everything like that. Specifically with the world building and how much attention is paid to it, but it felt like such a different story, and it is a one-off, so it wasn't a series. So
Sure.
I also haven't. That was my only other book by Sanderson that I've read that has been fully encapsulated in a single story.
Yeah.
So that was, I feel like, also had to be a different kind of algorithm that he had to follow for that.
Sure, and a different vein to get into, to tap into, a different, yeah. I think that's kind of typical, I guess, right? Like I like that we get used to, because we also, you get used to how an author wrote one thing, and so you're like, wow, they're so good at this. Like, I bet their other stuff is going to be very similar. And then you read it, and you're like, oh, not really. Like,
No.
I
Actually, you fucking suck.
like. I mean, if anything, if I'm one of the reasons why I like reading Kay so much is because A, he's consistently very good,
Yeah.
and B, like he's mostly writing similar things, not the same by any stretch.
Mm-hmm.
There's always new characters, there's always new themes, there's always new points in history to explore because he bases all of his fantasy books off of like historical events.
Yeah.
But like, he writes a very melancholy style. Like things aren't going to be fixed with all the heroes winning. Like there's going to be resolution, but it's not going to be like this perfect storybook ending to all of it. And like it often focuses on like great people doing great things or affecting the world in certain ways, or theoretically falling short of that too. But it follows those types of like characters as well. So there
So
is familiarity, even though there's differences in each story.
it does feel like Guy Gavriel Kay is your fairy smut. Like, it's a very similar, like, you're like, yeah, like, I know what I'm going to get when I read it. Like, I know, like, the type of author that he is. I know the type of story that I'm going to get. And it's very comfortable. It's very comfy for me. So, like, I'm going to read it, and I'm going to read all of it. And that is me with fairy fantasies.
Guy, please do not listen to this podcast.
I would fucking okay, don't act like you wouldn't actually read a fairy fantasy by Guy Gavriel Kay.
Oh yeah, I think it's gonna be tough for me to turn down anything that he's ever written. So yes, that's
Right.
probably true.
This is what needs to happen.
Guy Gabriel K, please write a spin-off of Akatar and
No, I don't want a spin-off. I want a Guy Gavriel Kay.
oh, you want his own take on it.
I just want him to enjoy fairy smut as much as the rest of us. You haven't really done fairy smut.
No, can't say I have.
Because I was thinking the blood and ass.
I'm not even laughing at the word substitution so much as just the fact that I had to remember that book for a second was just like,
Oh,
wow.
you better fucking remember it because we're gonna have to finish it.
Are we? Is she ever gonna actually do this? Because
Who knows? We have to know which book she's gonna rewrite again. Still comes up as like book talk book.
wait, what comes up as a book?
Blood and Ash.
A book talk book? What do you mean?
Oh, you don't know what book talk is. Book talk
Sorry.
is like TikTok, but
no, sorry.
specific for
Oh
books.
yeah, sorry. I did know that. I just didn't follow along with the.
Don't lie. Don't lie to our listeners.
No, because you brought it up for Blood and Ash and said about
Oh
what
yeah,
book
no, I
talk
definitely
is.
know what that. I definitely know what that is. Not even on. I can't even send you TikToks anymore.
There you can.
I have to download them.
Oh my god, so hard.
Okay, don't get gross.
We were talking about fairy smut.
We're talking about fairy smut. Okay, don't get gross.